Armchair Generals Unite! We're maxing out our build queue with the best strategy games you can play right now in 2019. Strategy gaming. It's literally the thinking person's genre. The only reflex-heavy Twitch gaming here is hitting the skip button when the Red Alert series tries to get you to watch one of its indescribable cutscenes. No, instead of trigger-happy action, the strategy landscape is a place where the player can lay out plans and watch them come to fruition over time, maturing like an oak-smoked Paul Rudd. He's 50, you know. This is a genre where responsibility over hundreds of lives is commonplace, and mistakes have biblical body counts. 2019 is proving especially fertile ground for this left mouse button enthusiast's genre of choice, serving up not just big budget propositions, but retro indies, early access projects well into playable territory, and not one, but two prehistoric RTS games. Nothing could sell this video harder than that fact, so let's get on with it. The best strategy games to play in 2019. Into the Breach is a turn-based strategy condensed into its most simplified and most potent form. Each fight plays out in just 5 turns on an 8x8 grid, and you're placed in charge of 3 mechs. A deceptively simple setup for what turns out to be one of the most deep and brain-melting strategies of recent times. There's a pretty decent story lurking beneath the pixelated grids and mega satisfying kill animations too, which probably isn't an easy thing to pull off when the basic premise boils down to yet another alien invasion. Pesky Vec, back, or I'll spend a bit more time upgrading my mechs and just have another go at it. How'd you like that? Complex, challenging, and always making its limited pixels work their hardest to blanket you in retro strategy aesthetics, Into the Breach is one for genre aficionados. What happens when you put steampunk in the freezer? The answer is obviously Frostpunk, and we'll move straight into how well it blends 4X and city builder games before you have a chance to stop and think about how truly terrible that joke was. In its own imagined alternate reality, climate change really worked a number on the planet in Victorian times, plunging us all into another ice age. The message might be scarily resonant now, but it's not all doom and gloom. Just look at how nice that totally ruined world looks here, with your crude torches lighting ramshackle settlements. Silver linings and all that. As you send your devoted task force out to forage for coal and wood, you're not trying to exert power, but instead hoping to ensure humanity's survival, which is a nice twist among many nice twists in this game. Speaking of, shout out to the surprisingly deep story once again. We were just here to click on things, and yet Frostpunk thawed our hearts.
Time to get to work!
Perhaps you never stopped playing Age of Empires in the intervening years between its release in 1997 and the definitive edition in 2018. And if that's true, honestly I applaud you. Applaud and hope to never meet you in a multiplayer match. For everyone else, the lapsed emperors of yesteryear for whom Microsoft's historical RTS represents a nostalgic surge of fondness, well, the definitive edition lets you bask in that fondness while looking at prettier graphics. This is very much a warts and all remake, mind you, so the AI sometimes takes odd routes to the waypoints you set, just like it did in the olden days. The campaign structure stays just the same too, which seems simple to the point of quaint now in 2019. For a pure and familiar experience with new levels of sheen, you can't really go wrong with Age of Empires' latest edition. Ubisoft's Anno games have always had a singular knack for making this whole empire management thing seem lovely and relaxing. That's not to say there isn't considerable thinking involved when it comes to the town planning, trade routes and political skullduggery of the 1800s New World. It's just that Anno makes it so gently engrossing with its therapeutic music and lovely incidental visual details, so you never feel harangued. In the classic city builder tradition, this is a rags to riches story in which your meagre trading post expands over the hours to form a truly impressive urban sprawl. And one you can take real pride in too, because you really sweated the details, agonised over the road layouts and invested real emotions into the well-being of those teeny tiny people milling about on them. City builders can be fiddly and confusing when they're not done this well. It's to everyone's benefit that the Anno series just keeps going until there are no more dates that add up to 9.
You reached a new milestone.
The Warhammer 40k universe is all about scale, isn't it? Unlike a lot of fantasy creations, it's a universe-sized universe, and that must make it quite tricky for developers to really harness the license in a game. Not so for Battlefleet Gothic Armada 2 though, whose conflicts play out against the backdrop of endless grimdark space, and whose characters and factions are more numerous than the George R.R. Martin remake of the warriors that we just imagined in our heads. Since the nuts and bolts of combat are pretty simple, amounting to positioning your fleet of double hard death ships and eliminating your enemies, the strategy in Armada 2 comes from anticipating your opponent's movements and positioning your fleet strategically to head them off. You can usually win the mission by capturing and holding control points, as well as blowing up all who oppose you, so there's scope for different playstyles here too. Frankly, what kind of list would this even be if we didn't give Civ a passing mention? While RTS games wax and wane in public affection, Sid Meier's unique take on resource management, city building and combat strategy is evergreen. So yes, Civilization 6 is definitely still a game you should be playing in 2019, because in addition to all the above, it has a new expansion. Gathering Storm introduces new leaders and tweaks AI behaviour so that you endure fewer instances of people being absolutely furious at you for no discernible reason, but the real headline features are natural disasters and global warming. Odd things to get excited about, I'll grant you, but they both add a fascinating tactical wrinkle to the formula. Rising water levels consume coastal tiles as civilizations burn fossil fuels to power their cities, while volcanoes and river floods have the power to both destroy and, in the long term, benefit your territory via fertility bonuses. Oh, and there's more Sean Bean voice lines. Should have just led with that, really.
We must adapt, press forward, if we are to see our journey's end.
Speaking of Civ, John Schaefer was the lead designer on Civilization 5, and you can see that game's DNA all over At the Gates, even though in this game you're doing the exact opposite of your usual 4X duties. Rather than fending off those bothersome barbarians, this time you are those barbarians looking to run amok across the civilized world. Or, just sort of infiltrate it if that sounds altogether too mean. Such is the barbarity on show here, you only ever build one settlement in At the Gates, and it's this crazy topsy-turvy thinking that proves so refreshing. The resource management aspect works just like you'd expect from any hex-based 4X game, but since you need to keep your band moving and often bring your settlement with you, your relationship with those resources is very different. We'll admit the challenge is quite rich for our blood, but if you've ever wondered exactly how much fun it'd be to play as Attila's Huns for a change, here's a good way to find out. Do you know what the really interesting thing is about this prehistoric survival strategy hybrid? It's that really, life hasn't changed very much for virtual world overlords over the eons. Even though this lot in Dawn of Man have only recently discovered fire, life is similar for them to the denizens of a Command & Conquer regime. Run around gathering resources, put it in a big pile, and then build new things according to a top-down arrangement that looks pleasing to your invisible ruler. And before you start griping about running out of food or spending your entire life standing in a river trying to spear fish, remember who put those rudimentary hides on your back, eh? Although you're not terribly advanced at the beginning of the game, you can work your way through a Civ-style tech tree all the way up to the Bronze Age by spending knowledge earned by, killing this lovely wolf here. In fact, interacting with your environment in almost any way earns you a bit of knowledge, so before long you're presiding over quite a clever tribe of tent-dwelling Neanderthals. Yes, actual billions. And if you don't believe us, just look at this lot. Relentless, terrifying blighters that they are. The idea in They Are Billions, the tower defense apocalypse strategy released into early access in 2017, is pretty simple. You're in charge of a human settlement and it's your job to stop these hordes of zombies from getting in and turning everyone to jam. The execution, however, will keep you up at night wondering about the exact placements of your gates, whether you needed that extra flamethrower, and which weak spot in your perimeter the undead will inevitably swarm and break through. Surviving each wave is just so satisfying, so you actually feel like taking on its higher difficulties after you've managed to survive a campaign or two. And it's at this point you really start to know what fear feels like. Would you mind just arranging yourselves into single file? It'd make life so much easier for my snipers, you know.
Let's get them!
Proving that prehistoric times have inexplicably come the new World War III for RTS games, War Party takes you back to the days when loincloths were the be-all and end-all of fashionable attire, and fighting off velociraptors was just part of the daily chore list for early man. It's a fictionalised version of our species' early days then, but one that makes for a lightning-fast and refreshingly different RTS. For example, Tank Rush? Nah, tanks are another few million years off yet. In War Party, it's all about launching a man with reasonably sized piece of wood rush. Simple, but devastatingly effective because our enemies are just stupid old lizards. They might be big, but they're not really Sun Tzu when it comes to battlefield tactics. What we love best about War Party is that although there is a tiny bit of resource management, mostly it's an RTS played at a galloping pace, all about building up troops and sending them into battle, because that's really the fun bit of RTS games, isn't it? No one's here for the mining.
Enemy contact!
Construction complete. Our build queue's empty and we've totally depleted our resources, bringing you game suggestions and dodgy genre metaphors. Inevitably, we can't cover all the brilliant strategy options available right now, so why not let us know your own picks in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it and hit the subscribe button for more like this. Remember to turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video from us, and until next time, may your hex tiles be fertile and your armies victorious.